Welcome to today's presentation. I am a corporate pleb, and this is How to Corporate. Now that we know the importance of sales, the romance surrounding it, the archetypes and how you can fit in and why you might want to, when you're in a sales role, what's next? Over and above doing the job, the first thing to learn before knowing your product is knowing how you're going to be able to prove your value in the role from day one. Sales as a position is extremely volatile. At any given time, the powers that be in your organization can decide on a feast or famine strategy with the sales team. They can either restructure your pay schedule so you get less, they can cut your department to the quick by canning half the staff, or glut it by 200% more sales reps. Sales is a role of extremes. It shifts routinely, and every new executive hired 5 minutes ago seems to think they know the answer to better sales. Add more reps, reduce the reps, give reps more money, subtract payouts to reps. Every new sales leader seems to think that they have a novel approach to more sales, and yet each and every one of them will focus on addition or subtraction with personnel and compensation as their only real direction. In fact, every new sales leader you get will look at what the last sales leader in their chair did, and they will do the opposite. If the last leader added staff, new leader will cut staff. Last leader cut commission, new leader will add incentive. Sales leaders are usually not terribly creative. And you, dear sales pleb, you get to deal with that. So what can you do? See, if you already know going into it that your team will expand and contract with personnel and benefits routinely, that means regularly, you can survive by being able, at a moment's notice, to prove your value with numbers. So it is a good idea as a pleb to always know where you stand in relation to your colleagues, because you're in a department that is very unstable at all times. Always be able to show your value on paper. Many sales reps are wholly ignorant of how they compare to their fellow sales reps. Rest assured, though, that your finance team and your management team knows how you stack up against your colleagues. When it comes time to fire people, they already know who they can safely. Know where you stand always. If you know where you stand, you know if you need to improve in order to put yourself at least in the top tier of sales reps, so that when firing season comes round, you're not in front of the firing squad. So what does proving your worth look like on the ground? So behind the scenes, your sales department runs off of numbers. Who is selling the most is sort of what it boils down to. Who is booking the most? Who is getting the most revenue annually? Who is getting clients that are easy to retain and deal with? And who brings on painful clients to work with? Who pulls in the big fish? And who has a large book of small clients? Numbers are your lifeblood. They tell the story and your value. You, as a low-level pleb with no friend favors, no cushy authority or chairs, you, as someone whose job is never safe, have to be able to prove that you are worth keeping on staff should anyone care to ask. Okay, how? Here's how. Find the internal reporting that shows how you all stack up against each other. Sales is all about competition, also internal competition. Know who sells what, how they sell, and what their shortcomings are. Don't just know the bottom line, know how to qualify your data. The person who sold the most this year may not be the best rep. They might have had one lucky deal that didn't even require much work on their end, and it makes them look top tier. Bottom line number isn't always the most important. Know how numbers work and what they actually show. From the example here, if we take a look, this is actually my numbers and how I stacked up against my colleagues a couple years ago. So we have the second from the top here, so I was effectively not the top tier rep. But just in line with what I said, the top tier rep here actually had a decent amount of deals that they fell into where they weren't actually required to do any selling. They came in on the back end and inherited some deals that were already done from another sales rep who left the organization. As a result, their numbers officially were bumped up, but the concept was that if we look down at the win ratio and the pipeline captured numbers, that top tier rep actually is not a rep you'd want on your team compared to what my numbers are just below it. So when we talk about validating the actual numbers, bottom line, sure, I fell short of first place and landed in second, but if we look at what I actually captured, what I didn't capture, and what my win ratio was, if you were picking me for a kickball team that was sales centric, you'd probably want to go with me because my ratios are much better. So the idea here is when you look at numbers, when you validate the data, you can't just look at what was your bottom line? What did this all shake out to for the year? You have to look at average value of deals, what deals you're going into losing versus winning, if you're having to work with other people that take up your slack, or if you don't need group projects to get your job done and you go in and do everything solo. So overall investment of the company in you is also going to be important. So if the company has to throw a bunch of sales support in your direction, all that sales support has salaries and bonuses and pay scales and commissions. So the more support that has to be thrown your way to be a successful sales rep is also going to affect bottom line and has to be subtracted from your overall winning amount. So keeping in mind the ideas of existing staff supporting you is also a factor that comes into play in the amount of money you're actually pulling in or booking for the company. Things also that are going to come into play are what you're actually missing out on. Having a pipeline that has a ton of money in it is great, but if you miss everything, if you're losing over half the time, if 7 out of 10 deals are lost, then you are swinging and missing at everything. You're not a person anyone wants to put up to bat. Most sales reps really sort of shake out, as we can see here, is just an average. Most of them are not coming in at 50% plus. Most sales reps are coming in shy of that, which overall you shake it out over an entire company and an entire year, it's all going to collectively go in the same pot and probably be okay for you to be a individual sales rep that isn't 50% plus win rate. But as I said before, this is a volatile position and department. During the course of any year, belts are going to tighten at certain points in time. If your company is looking at a list like this, which behind the scenes their finance team and the management team is looking at this type of list, they're going to look at it and it becomes a very simple decision who gets to stay and who gets to go. So belt tightening happens regularly. If it didn't happen this year, you can count on it happening next year. Someone will come in and decide that it's time to clean house. And if you're stacking up on this type of report behind the scenes, in the bottom half or the bottom quarter, then you are up for kicking out of the organization. That is how this works, and this is why it's very important as a sales pleb to know where you stand amongst your brethren. You have to be able to show on paper something as simple as what you're looking at on the screen here. The idea, of course, is making sure that your worth is boiled down to a number that executives, C-suite personnel, and directors can understand at a glance without having to dig through data to come to the same conclusions. Always make sure you know your worth so that at any given time when they decide it's time to cut the fat, you're not the fat that gets cut. So again, what's the takeaway here? As a pleb, you got to be able to explain inside of 3 to 5 sentences, as if you were addressing your sales executive in an elevator, how and why you are worth it. You are feeding that executive. You are funding them. They don't know your name or care that you put food on their table. You are nothing to them. You're just another sales rep. Prove your worth keeping by knowing your numbers and having those readily available. You always have to be able to prove it. If you're bad at numbers, then know how to kiss up to managers, directors, and executives in a way that makes them want to have you around just for their own amusement. So sometimes there's not just numbers, sometimes just making sure that you're good at being a sycophant. That can sometimes save you. Remember, it doesn't matter how you save yourself. You are in it to feed your family and yourself. Do that how you need to. The professional sales rep brings image and prestige. The sleazeball brings entertainment and nonsense. But both of these types of sales reps bring in money. Pick an angle that works for you personally and run with it. Overall, the lesson here is that sales chews through reps regularly. Cultivate a bad taste for being eaten via selling yourself internally in whatever method works for you. Thank you for joining me. Please come back and explore the corporate world from the standpoint of a common worker pleb at any time. See you soon.